Orfila to campus as our 2013 Distinguished History Maker. We have a very short period of time today. I wish that we had more, but we're going to accommodate this presentation within University Hour. And so we realize a lot of us, including me, and I think some people in the audience have to run to our 1 o'clock class following our event. So we're going to get started right away. I am going to restrain myself from an extensive introduction as much as I would like to give you the full story and pay appropriate respect to Ambassador Orfila's accomplishments. I'm going to keep it very, very brief in the interest of time. As you probably know, Ambassador Alejandro Orfila has served as the Secretary General of the Organization of American States and the Argentine Ambassador to the United States, Japan, and the former Soviet Union. He has known and worked with leaders throughout the world in his over 30 years in the diplomatic service. Additionally, he has worked closely with U.S. presidents from Dwight D. Eisenhower to George H.W. Bush. Upon his retirement, he has continued his family's tradition of winemaking and opened up the Orfila Winery in Escondido, California. So we are so pleased that you're joining us today and giving us your valuable time, especially to share your experiences and your perspectives with our students and our faculty. So I have 3 questions that I'm going to be asking Dr. Ambassador Orfila, and I'm going to be watching the time. We're going to try to get all the way through the 3 questions so that we can save about 15 minutes at the end for your questions. Okay? So the first question has to do with the Panama Canal. On December 31, 1999, the Panama Canal was handed over to the Panamanian government, ending almost 100 years of direct U.S. involvement in the canal zone. But it was in 1977 that President Jimmy Carter and General Omar Torrijos signed the Panama Canal Treaties, abrogating the Hay-Bunau-Varilla Treaty of 1903 and calling for the U.S. to eventually turn over control of the waterway to Panama. Can you give us insight into this historical moment based on your experience? From your perspective, what factors motivated President Carter to initiate this change, and what was the larger impact for relations between Latin America and the United States?
Very good. And you give me 10 minutes. Well, no, I like it. I like it. I will be very short, and I will try to be very, how can I put it, honest, because the issue is a touchy issue. Panama Canal. First of all, how the Panama Canal started. I don't know if you are familiar with it or not, but I strongly recommend that you go over and get more information than the little thing that I will give you that. The Panama Canal, or the Canal of Panama, was not the name in the beginning because Panama practically didn't exist. Starts with the construction by the French. The French try to do a good job. They don't have maybe enough technology, enough money, and a lot of malaria. And as a result, fail. Then what happened? It happened very simple, that the timing is at the end of the 1800s. Everything in the world is in evolution. The Europeans are the ones who run the show. The Americans are not yet running the show, but actually is the beginning of what you can call something very important in the history of this magnificent country, which is the United States, of the famous manifesto, the magnificent manifesto. That means that the Americans start moving to there. And one of the movements they make is take the work that the French gave up and try to build the Panama Canal. They succeed. Must tell you that Panama in those days was a province of Colombia. And to get the agreement that they got well, put it a different way, they could not get what they wanted, the Americans, from the Colombians. And the Colombians said, no, we are not going to give you what you have. They were in the toughest time. President, I believe, in those days is Roosevelt, the first Roosevelt. If serious part of you study story, if I make a mistake, be nice to me. But I think it's the years of Teddy Roosevelt. Tough fellow. One of the policies of the U.S. in those days was called the big stick. No, kind of a difficult name for a policy, for the receiver of the thing. Well, anyway, to make sure in the 10 minutes, we can talk for 10 hours in the thing, but they decided that they want the Panama Canal. And what they did is very simple. Exercise the necessary influence that in those days they started to have. They were not what they were supposed at the end of the Second World War. That they wrote what was needed, and for quite a few years they have been running. And now it's a little more slow, let's say. They're running, but they still running the show. The result of the pressure put on Colombia was a cession. Panama province ceded and became the Republic of Panama. Beautiful way of getting from these people everything you wanted. And they got the famous treaty, Hey Varilla, that Dr. Nava mentioned. Well, what they did, to make it again without going technical, they got a piece of land of the Republic of Panama belonged to the United States of America. And that was then the famous creation of the Canal Zone. I've been in the Canal Zone. I'm 89, and then I've been in many, many places in history. I could be a part of the history because I was in the Canal Zone. Canal Zone was a magnificent expression of colonialism. Colonialism, the Americans good looking, fine, the Panamanians working around. It was not exactly what is the spirit of America. The Zonians themselves were different. They were not the type of Americans that America is made for and what is today and has been for practically for the whole history. Then the treaty had one clause that it was horrible, that it says that the area of the canal was going to be not ceded, not necessarily becoming part of, but will be run and owned at perpetuity by the United States of America. And they ran the canal, they built the canal, they moved the canal, they had the canal, became a very important part of the trade, and well, for many, many years. There were a few voices, because there is always elements in America that think more liberally, and they thought, well, maybe we did a little too much, let's review this thing, but never had any problem, any result. President Johnson came into the picture, because he created a commission, which was known as the Johnson Commission, that was going to review the claims of the government of Panama, because the government of Panama was very, very unhappy with the treaty. The first act of the Panamanian government was to sign the famous Hey Varilla treaty. It was a treaty in which Varilla was a Panamanian of doubtful extraction, and Hey was an American, very strong, very intelligent, and say, this is it. And it was a take it or leave it thing. And then, with the Johnson Commission, they start reviewing. But you know how the system works here. It's a democracy. You have to get the Congress, you have to get the House, you have to get the Senate, you have to get the public opinion. And it was a subject that it was not appealing to anybody. Then the thing came up, and I tell you, I'm an Argentine. I live in the United States. I feel very, very close to the United States. I spent most of my life in the United States because of my career. I was lucky. Or I have a good friend back in Buenos Aires who always gave me a good assignment, you know. Well, the fact is that I spent many, many years here. I think I know this country very well. I think all the wonderful things that it has. And a president by the name of Carter, Jimmy Carter, took the responsibility of reviewing that thing. And one day I asked him, why? Why did you ever got interested in the Panama Canal? Remember, governor of Georgia, and inland American, usually the Americans which are more worldwide, let's say, are West Coast and East Coast, central part of the country. They are, but remember what Tip O'Neill said, business and politics is local. In other words, I am in his case, a congressman because the people that I have back there support me, not because the people of Washington support. Politics is local. Well, anyway, he did it. And he gave me the answer that gave me to me the feeling that I was right, what I believed from the very beginning that I started my relation with the United States, that this is a great country. Because President Carter told me, Mr. Ambassador, because it was the right thing to do. And it was true. If there is something that you cannot talk about history of a country who is a democracy as it is the United States, who has the people from all over, and is the hope of the world in many ways. If you prefer not to talk, turn the page, is the Panama Canal beginnings. And I think it's a wonderful thing, the Panama Canal ending. Why? Because the strongest country in the world negotiates with one of the smallest countries in the world, Panama, negotiated as equal. I was there. I saw it. I saw the two American ambassadors. There was a magnificent man, career man, by the name of Ellsworth Bunker, and then a magnificent lawyer from Washington, D.C. called Saul Linowitz. And those two respected the others, close negotiations with Ambassador Lewis of Panama, Torrijos himself, and Royo, who was a vice president and who eventually was also, thereafter was a president of Panama. And I saw them negotiate. Nobody told me that. I didn't read it in the San Diego Tribune, which I wouldn't read it because it wasn't printed that. but let's say the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. No. It was the two in equal terms, going back and forward until they reached an agreement that I think is a very good agreement. Now, I campaigned a little, because in my job I couldn't campaign much. I would have campaigned with all enthusiasm to convince you, the Americans. You should see the reaction that I have seen in some places. From calling traitor the president, to giving away our land, Well, a lot of things. And then the communists will take over, and so on, so on, so forth, and we will lose this and that. Now, what happened? By that time, the relation between the United States and Latin America, the relation between the United States and Latin America, seriously, talking honestly, not, no, honestly, they are always kind of it's a love, hate is too much. Love, dislike affair. Love because you can give me a lot. I'm expecting you to give me. Love because I love your music, I love your football, I love everything. When I say football, I made a hell of a concession because to me football is the other football, soccer. And by the way, the Argentine, the president #1 in the world happens to be Argentine. Lionel Messi. I put my commercial and I continue.
Okay.
Well, then they came up with a treaty that it was not perfect and it's working perfectly. The Panama Canal is run today as well or better than what was run when Americans were running the canal. Never had any problem. No communist country have taken, like they say, that some of them say that they will take Colón or they will take Balboa and we will lose the canal and so forth. No. And now they are thinking how they are going to make it bigger for the present thing. That is. But it's more than that. To me, the Panama Canal has become something much more important than the business, the money, the ship. Has become a symbol. Has become a symbol of how a big country, a great country, must treat a small country. Having an account their interest, having an account what it should be, how can I put it, should be respected because happens to be the interest of the other, not imposing my interest. Because remember two things, always some of you will follow into international politics or domestic politics. Politics is the art of the possible. That is the definition of politics. First it's not a science, it's an art, like painting. There are people who can do it and people who cannot do it. And the art of the possible. And, how can I put it? When you have something like that, you have to realize that you have to have into attention the interest of the other. And when you have the interest of the other, then you are making real politics, in my opinion. You don't impose things. Anything that is imposed eventually kicks back. The Panama Canal was one.
Oh, and that's, if I may, that's
Yes.
an excellent place for me to interject. I suspect we may have some questions about his comments about the Panama Canal, so please jot them down. But if I may I move us along
Yes.
in the interest of time?
You in a diplomatic way are telling me you went over the 10 minutes.
Well, you know, there are so many students in the audience today. What I would love to ask you to share, Ambassador Orfila, is to sort of shift gears a little bit, but not entirely, is if you would talk a little bit about your start in the field of the Foreign Service and diplomacy, and if perhaps you have some advice that you would give to our students who might be interested in foreign service and international affairs.
Yes, you were the one in San Diego too?
I don't know if we'll have time. We'll see.
Then I prefer to talk about San Diego then.
Okay.
You
All right.
don't mind, you don't have
Okay.
time.
All right.
Now,
Go ahead.
what she was telling me is a very big, I knew that it was a trick question. This is what I was going to do one day. But the one of San Diego is very important. You live in an area that is extraordinarily important for the world of the future. Why? Vis-a-vis international affairs. Because the President of the United States has already said, we are a Pacific country. He said it. We are a Pacific country. Up to now, the center of the world was the Atlantic, Europe and North America. Now is America and Asia. Asia is as important now and more important in the future than was the Atlantic and between Europe and America. And to me, San Diego could become the center of the connection between the new area, Asia, North America, South America. I criticize Americans in only one thing. Up to now, they have always looked east, west, very seldom south. They don't pay much attention to Latin America. If they tell you something different, it's wrong. If you look at the history of the relation with the United States with Latin America, policies, one, the only one, really, the good neighbor policy, FDR. Policy, potentially, the Alliance for Progress of Kennedy, but it couldn't start because, unfortunately, you know what happened. And that's all. We never had a real policy with Latin America. We had negotiation with Mexico, with this, with that, with the other, with the NAFTA, and so forth. But a real policy toward Latin America, no. As a result, the Latin Americans feel that the North, the United States, don't pay enough attention. Sometimes they are asking for too much because they don't offer too much to what they should offer. Example, suppose, is the case of today. We have corruption in Latin America, we have insecurity in Latin America, we have a lot of minus, but minus that it could be plus if we come up with a policy that it will work on them. And to me, if there is Americans over here, or the Mexican ancestry, remember that famous phrase that it was said by Porfirio Diaz. Poor Mexico, so far from God and so close to the United States. It's exactly the opposite now, not the far from God. It's always nice to be not far but close. But the closeness to the United States is one of the greatest assets of Mexico today. And the moment that the two of them understand that that is the case, the two of them, and the moment that that happens, San Diego will be one of the areas that will receive the great impact, and so forth. I put my little thing for San Diego.
That was excellent. I think that will also generate some questions. So thank you so much. And I think that the idea kind of geographically of San Diego as a center, a potential center for a more enlightened and thoughtful relation between the United States and Latin America is a great place for us to maybe open up the floor to questions. Perhaps you have questions about the history of the Panama Canal Treaty negotiations or questions about the borderlands. Please, we'd like to hear from you. We have about 15 minutes left.
I'm Ibrahim Al-Marashi. I teach Middle East history here. And one of the things I was interested in was Middle Eastern immigration to Latin America. And I was wondering, working under the presidency of Carlos Menem Said, I always use this as an example of a Lebanese or Middle Eastern immigrant who could rise to the presidency in Argentina.
Yeah.
Whereas in this country, I mean, yeah, I can't even imagine a Middle Easterner rising to the presidency of the U.S. But how was his connection to the Middle East when you? I was wondering in terms of identity.
Well, first of all, it's difficult for me to tell you Latin America. Some countries of Latin America, Argentina, the thing you mentioned. If you are not of Middle East origin in northwestern Argentina, you got little chances of becoming governor of your state.
Interesting.
Because they have a very great influence. Menem is a very good example. He was a governor of La Rioja, and he eventually became president of Argentina. We have a very good immigration from the Middle East and Latin America. In the case of Argentina, Syrians, of Chileans, Palestinians. and so forth. In the case of Brazil, from practically all over the Middle East. The relation that we have with them is very, very close, but not from the political side. Nothing that is happening today, I'm sure that there is that. Another very important thing that you have to have in mind, and I will insist, Argentina is the 5th Jewish community in the world. Very, very important, the Jewish community in Argentina. And it happened something when there was the disastrous that about 6-7 years ago, the Jewish embassy and the center, cultural center of the Jewish people in Buenos Aires was blown up by, they say, Iranians. So much so that in this very moment, we are negotiating between Iran and Argentina the compensation of what happened on that. But I will not share because of minutes. Very important in countries like Argentina, Ecuador, Chile, Brazil, and others.
Thank you.
Other questions, please?
You were talking about the fact that the United States is it hasn't had a coherent policy towards Latin America, towards South America in the past, that it's sort of developed one. I just wonder whether, to what extent do you believe it's possible to have a coherent policy towards a continent that has such a diversity of cultures and of people on it? Because it seems to me that sometimes in the past when the United States has tried to have a coherent policy, it's ended up being something like containment, which has problems of its own, that it creates certain problems in some areas but has beneficial consequences in the other. So to what extent do you think it's possible to have a coherent policy towards a whole
It
continent?
will be very, very difficult, but we have to try. We have to try. Suppose I was Secretary General of the OAS. One day here in San Diego, and in a place like this, I had a question. How do you feel to be the Minister of Colonies of the United States? To the Secretary General of the OAS. I have to say, next question, please. You couldn't answer that question. But that question reflects the feeling of a lot of people. That question is, they say, I wouldn't say hate, no, not hate, but uneasiness and love that there is between Latin America and this. If you go to the upper classes, of course, they all love America. But when you go to, how can you produce in a place a Chavez? I hope there is no Venezuela around. But this is my opinion. And since I only represent myself, I can tell you. It was a joke. The things he said, the way he acted. It is true that he had a lot of reason to be upset, but it's not acceptable that he will be the type of leader in Latin America that it cannot be accepted. Well, anyway, yes, it's going to be very difficult, but I tell you, if you don't try, if you, us, the Americans, don't try, somebody else will try. And somebody else is already trying, and somebody is already in, and those are the countries that we have to look into the future. If you ask me today what language you think that your son should learn, I will say Chinese. My father told me English, because he knew that in my generation, the United States will be the main power. Ain't true in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, which is a generation. Therefore, we have to try. We have to keep, we cannot make mistakes, honestly, and I don't want to get involved in local politics, no, because I know my style. But when you have a president, they say, Mr. Khrushchev, destroy this wall, and you make a wall in San Diego y Tijuana, something wrong. All the character of the first demonstrate a total different character of the second. Then which one is? This is what I said. I don't think it's hate, and I put it in emphasis, because a lot of people say, no, the Latin Americans hate the Americans. Not true. The Latin Americans, with the Americans, but if you play music or you do anything, you have them. You have to try. I have to try with people who can communicate.
Thank you.
Questions?
I'm not a student, but I was wondering if you could address the question that
Yes.
Professor Nava asked you about how would you advise the students to begin a career in foreign service, from your perspective.
From my perspective and my experience, well, I think I was extremely lucky. I had much more luck than talent, to tell you the truth, honestly, because I went in my career like this. Shoo. Well, anyway, diplomacy is a magnificent career, in my opinion. I could have been now squeezing grapes in Mendoza, which was my future. This is what my father wanted me to do. But I decided to go into the foreign service because I wanted to communicate with people. But it's a difficult thing too. It's not the glamour thing that a lot of people feel. It has a lot of minus, particularly family minus. You live in different places. Your children at the moment start thinking, what are we? And suddenly you find the son of the ambassador or whatever, Honduras, that is working for Citibank. He was able to go over and study, get a career, but instead of going back to Honduras, he goes to Citibank or an American company or a foreign company because there is more future than Honduras. Who opened that door? Diplomacy. The profession of the father. I think that we need diplomats. We need. It's important because we have to communicate better. We have to have professionals that know the mentality of the other people, the interests of the other people, and can talk the same language. Believe me, it's not a matter of only speak the language. It's to think like an American thing, an Argentine thing, a Mexican thing. It's totally different between a Mexican and an Argentine. We think different. We speak the same Spanish. Oh, you say, no, but it's totally different. Go further, between an Uruguayan and an Argentine, it's different. And this is why we have, every so often we have problems. In this very moment, we have a lot of problems with Uruguay. Or the Uruguayans have a lot of problems with the Argentines, which is exactly the same, but from a different perspective. Diplomacy will give them the tools, let's say, to use to approach everybody, to be able to communicate with somebody and so forth. But it's the difficult. It was a kid from here, I told you that I asked him, why don't you follow diplomacy? He was working in the winery that I have here. And now he tried. The beginning is very difficult. You are talking hundreds of people who want to become foreign service officers. And you will see that the vacancies are only tens of people. In other words, they are 1,000 potentials and 100 that they get a job. Very, very selective. It has this, suppose I have my wife is German, I'm Argentine. We have lived most of our lives in America. I'm 89. I'm starting to feel that from the upstairs they start calling me. And I said, I asked to my wife, where is home for you? Very hell of a question because it's difficult. Because, meaning, when I go, what she does? She goes back to Germany. It was the other way around. I remain in the United States. Well, that is one of the prices that you pay with the family. You have a family that somehow disintegrates for one reason or another reason. Reasons are supposed. The fact that the kids get much more possibilities and therefore a much wider panorama, not only the country or the diplomat, or the fact that they just like it and they decide to stay. I had one of the best members of my staff in Washington, was a fellow, a career fellow, that he had one problem. He was consul general in Miami. And when he was transferred to Argentina, the kids didn't want to go. He just said, no, my friend, no, this is my friend, blah, 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 blah. Result, they stay in Miami. And I tried to help to extend his extension, but to a point. And therefore, he went back to Argentina, and the kids stay in Miami, and they stay in Miami. It's a great, great career with characteristics different than others, opportunities different than others. And you have to have a character that allow you to adapt to all those transitions, changes, and possibilities.
Questions?
You don't have many questions.
Here,
John,
Carmen?
that's right.
No, oh, it is.
Working with so many different presidents, just wondering, like, how do the different presidents change policy toward different countries drastically, or is it pretty much like a constant
Well,
policy?
that's a very, very interesting question, because unfortunately, in the case of the Latin America, very few countries of Latin America have, you can call state policies. Brazil is one. Brazil is a country that has a policy, military, economically, financially, whatever. And they have local policies, which are politics, what would you can call politics. I will say that if the Latin America could develop more of a state policies, that you will know exactly what they are. And they are in some very, very few issues, such as, I tell you, the access to the Sea of Bolivia. Every president of Bolivia, whatever they say, from the ultra-conservative to a communist, if they were, I don't know if they are or not, they were, must get the access to the land of Bolivia. In Argentina, we have another one, the Malvinas, the Falkland Islands, that they were taken over by the British in 1823. And every government of Argentina will have to do something to recoup the Malvinas. And that also, I put this example very nicely, because of one thing. You also can make big mistakes. Mistakes as the one that Argentina did, that in 1982 went to war with Great Britain for the Malvinas. The greatest stupidity of any president or human being could have in mind. Ridiculous, because we were about to get it in another 20 years. Diplomacy, economics. The Malvinas are too far from London. They are too expensive to maintain. And slowly, we're becoming Argentine. Slowly. And this general that we had, God knows why he was not born in another country, decided to go over and get to war to the Malvinas. Cost us more than 360 soldiers, and we became the laughing stock of the world. And we got nothing. Then your question is very good. State policies, if there are state policy, there are other ones. Indeed, I mean, I just mentioned two. One is the relation between Chile and Peru, for suppose, the relation between Ecuador and Peru, boundaries, and that they are already solution. There's no more problem. But we still remembering that such and such an area was it. We must have a state policy. We want to have suppose no poverty or a minimum of poverty. We don't want to go over the budget and so forth. Well, that is not the case. The politics of the most of the government is today's policy, the party policy.
Other questions? I had a question about the border.
Yes.
That, as you were talking about it before, you know, the North American Free Trade Agreement had a wide variety of goals, and I think generally speaking is considered fully implemented. But the NAFTA, it seems to me, has not really addressed fundamental issues in terms of perception about the border.
Yeah.
In an odd kind of way, simultaneously we have the NAFTA ostensibly, you know, eliminating barriers to trade, and yet the wall itself keeps getting higher and higher and more expensive. So in that curious sort of contradictory situation, do you have any ideas, any perhaps areas where some of our students might be able to devote some attention and work for a future?
Yes, I think I can give you many ideas. The fact is, how do you implement ideas? How do you create the thinking? Now, the university and the students play a great role. When I came here to San Diego in 1989, your sister university,
San Diego State?
San Diego State, and University of California, San Diego, have put something in place called the San Diego Dialogue. And the San Diego Dialogue was an organization of about, I don't know, 200, 300, because whoever want to be a member, you want to be a member, come and work for us. Got a fellow by the name of Chuck Nathanson, the director who was a professor in the University of California, San Diego. The idea was the following. San Diego has a lot of possibilities and a lot of minors. One of the minors is too close to Los Angeles. It's in the shadow of Los Angeles. It's somehow what Baltimore is to Washington, or New Jersey to New York, or vice versa, New York to New Jersey. Well, if we could get an understanding, a dialogue with the people of Tijuana and the people of California, Mexico, of course, to start, we can do by far better. We have now a wonderful, wonderful airport. But we could have had that airport 20 years ago. If instead of having this airport today, we would have had an airport like the airport of Geneva, that you arrive in Geneva, you go to the left, you go to Switzerland. You go to the right, you go to France. Rodriguez, the airport, was there. What was the reason for that we didn't do? That was, we discussed that thing in the meeting of the San Diego Dialogue. And they go into something that maybe you will find that a little cynical. But I think that the key word in our relations, political relations, diplomatic relations, personal relations, is the word interest. What interest moves us? And when the interest that moved toward issue A is very strong, powerful, issue A goes A. If it goes to issue B and it's not the case, down will be issue B. In this particular case, it was the real estate and was other interests. Mind you that in the case of the Mexicans, there was also resistance in the other side vis-a-vis the Union. But to me, the union of the United States and Mexico is a natural. The border goes from the Atlantic to the Pacific. It's unique. The possibilities that you have are actually unique. But do we understand each other? I must say that there is one very difficult thing, unfortunately. The narcos. In the other side and in this side. Because we never talk, and that is something that if it was a group of Latin Americans, intelligent Latin Americans, here, they will tell you, tell me something, how many people did you actually destroy or put out of business in the American side on the consumption side? How you can have this extraordinary distribution system that it can go all the way from wherever they come in, all the way to, I don't know, Seattle or whatever. The whole country is covered, I think. How? That is a minus for both. But in my opinion, if there is a relation, it's not Latin America. Latin America, because of the problem that you said, is more difficult. But Mexico is a must of having to, but you have to look to Mexico as equal. You have to look at it equal. You don't have to. Did you anyone use, because it's another, she's a famous time and we have to.
We have 1 more minute.
1 more minute, one more minute.
I'm sorry to say.
No. But it's very important, very, very important that we understand that in Mexico we have, and I'm not Mexican, that we have a magnificent ally and a magnificent possibility with over 100 million people that one day can be over 100 million consumers. And we also can tell you, if we don't do it, somebody else will do it.
Very wise words. Well, would you please join me in thanking Ambassador Alejandro Orfila for coming today? I thank you very warmly for coming to campus, for working within our restricted time period, and for sharing this time with our students and faculty.